word. So now we're recording. So for the sake of those joining later by YouTube, this is week 9 of Early Old Testament History 1 here on Wednesday nights in person at Impact, but online as well. And for those of you watching later, I apologize that I didn't start the recording earlier. Kirk Castleman just prayed a wonderful prayer, encouraging us. And I am sorry that you don't get that prayer. I won't have him pray again right now, just for all of you. You were prayed for, but may the Lord bless you and encourage you through the class, even though you missed that wonderful prayer. So open up your Bibles to Genesis 28, continuing on with the story of Jacob tonight. Everything will be about Jacob. We last week read about him taking the blessing from Esau, and that first blessing there, birthright was one thing, but in the blessing, that one that he took really did belong to Esau. And we'll see tonight how he, in a sense, is later in his life when he's humbled by years and some of the hardships of life, he gives that blessing back. That was a blessing not intended for Jacob. And then we'll just see more detail about that. And one thing that I don't believe I mentioned last week in the story of Abraham with Ishmael and Isaac, we noted how Ishmael, God blessed him. And so we do a disservice to the scripture if we marginalize Ishmael. He had 12 sons also, kind of like the 12 tribes of Israel. But we see in the text that, and I don't believe I missed it anywhere, there is not a place where Abraham specifically blesses Isaac like he does, like say Jacob does, Esau, but Isaac does Jacob, and then to some degree Esau. If you look at, it's the Lord that blesses Isaac. And it could be that because Abraham was pained by Sarah's strong dislike for Ishmael, that he did not want to bless Isaac there and before Ishmael in order to make the wound even deeper. You see in 25:11, after Abraham's death, God blessed his son Isaac, who then lived near Beer Lahai-Roi. God blesses him, so Isaac doesn't fail to receive a blessing, but it's just interesting that we don't see that it is specifically Abraham blessing him in his life, not withholding it from him. He is blessed by God anyway, but Abraham's heart he did not dislike Isaac, but he had a heart for Ishmael. It pained him to see Ishmael driven away. So the father with the older son, the mother with the younger son. Of course, Isaac belonged to Sarah, unlike Ishmael. And then you get to Jacob, and he favors the older son, Esau, and the mother, Rebecca, favors the younger son. And so it's just interesting. And when we get to Joseph, it's kind of switched. Jacob doesn't favor the older, like Reuben. He favors the younger Joseph. Go on to 28, where we'll start tonight. You see right off, Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him and told him to go not marry one of the Canaanite women. So let's do a little bit of the video here. It kind of ends with, we're picking up with Abraham, just 2 or 3 minutes of this, and then we'll go into the text itself.
The gift from God. And so Abraham has lots of kids eventually, and he dies at a good old age. Now, the Jacob stories play out these themes even more dramatically. From birth, Jacob lives up to the meaning of his name, which is deceiver. He cheats his brother Esau out of his inheritance and blessing, and he does it by deceiving his old blind father, no less, and then he just takes off. He goes on to take 4 wives, even though he really only loves one, Rachel, and this creates all of these rivalries in the family. The only thing that humbles Jacob is being deceived by his uncle Laban, who cheats him out of years of his life. The tables have finally turned. And so it's a humbled Jacob that returns to his homeland. And in a very strange story, Jacob ends up wrestling with God as he demands that God bless him. Some things never really change, do they? However, God honors his determination, and he passes Abraham's blessing on to him. And he renames Jacob as Israel, which means wrestles with God. Now, it's this last part of the book, the story of Jacob's sons, where all the themes come to a head. Jacob loves his second.
So let's stop there. That's only just a little bit. We had seen a video previously, and with the other things that we need to cover tonight, I didn't want to do too much of it. Just giving us a graphic description there about Jacob. He certainly does reap what he sows. He deceives, his name meaning cheat or deceiver. He deceives his brother Esau from the birthright and then the blessing. And then he's deceived by Laban. The conflict, we'll see the conflict in the household and between the twins of Jacob and Esau is somewhat transferred to Jacob's household with the conflict that he himself is responsible for between Rachel and Leah by showing partiality, great partiality, loving Rachel, but not Leah. And one teacher noted, Jacob loves more than any other character. We hear about his love more than any other character in Genesis. And yet, because it's such a flawed love and a partiality towards Rachel over Leah, it causes more heartache than any other story that we see as well. Now, in what I was saying earlier about Abraham, Ishmael, and Isaac, and not saying at all that he did not love Isaac, because we get that clearly in Genesis 22. Take your son, your only son, whom you love. And so, yes, he loved him, but just the way that the blessings worked out. So let's go ahead and listen to, I always want us to go through as much of the text, hearing it as much as we can. We're going to just note on the map, of course, he's living down here far in the south around Beersheba, Beer Lahai, and we noted last week that even as Isaac is down here and Abraham, when he dies, that Isaac is living near where Hagar is down here. There may have been some, once Sarah was gone and her intense opposition to Hagar, then it seems there may have been some family reconciliation with Isaac being near Ishmael and Hagar, because Ishmael and Isaac were both there to bury their father. So chapter 28. Oh.
Chapter 28. So Isaac called for Jacob and blessed him. Then he commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman. In Aram, to the house of your mother's father Bethuel, take a wife for yourself there, from among the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother. May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. May he give you and your descendants the blessing given to Abraham, so that you may take possession of the land where you now reside as a foreigner, the land God gave to Abraham. Then Isaac sent Jacob on his way, and he went to Paddan Aram, to Laban, son of Bethuel the Aramean, the brother of Rebekah, who was the mother of Jacob and Esau. Now Esau learned that Isaac had blessed Jacob and had sent him to Paddan Aram to take a wife from there, and that when he blessed him, he commanded him, do not marry a Canaanite woman, and that Jacob had obeyed his father and mother and had gone to Paddan Aram. Esau then realized how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father Isaac. So he went to Ishmael and married Mahalath, the sister of Nebaioth, and daughter of Ishmael, son of Abraham, in addition to the wives he already had. Jacob left Beersheba and set out for Haran. When he reached a certain place, he stopped for the night because the sun had set. Taking one of the stones there, he put it under his head and lay down to sleep. He had a dream in which he saw a stairway resting on the earth, with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. There above it stood the Lord, and he said,
I am the Lord, the God of your father Abraham, and the God of Isaac. I will give you and your descendants the land on which you are lying. Your descendants will be like the dust of the earth, and you will spread out to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. All peoples on earth will be blessed through you and your offspring. I am with you, will watch over you wherever you go, and I will bring you back to this land. I will not leave you until I have done what I have promised you.
When Jacob awoke from his sleep, he thought,
Surely the Lord is in this place, and I was not aware of it.
he was afraid and said,
How awesome is this place! This is none other than the house of God. This is the gate of heaven.
Early the next morning, Jacob took the stone he had placed under his head and set it up as a pillar and poured oil on top of it. He called that place Bethel, though the city used to be called Luz. Then Jacob made a vow, saying,
If God will be with me and will watch over me on this journey I am taking, and will give me food to eat and clothes to wear, so that I return safely to my father's household, then the Lord will be my God. And this stone that I have set up as a pillar will be God's house. And of all that you give me, I will give you a tenth.
Genesis 28, Paul. Several things in there before we continue on. I showed you one map with Jacob being down here in Beersheba with Isaac going on his journey. He gets as far as Bethel, which is right around in this area, before he gets into the area of Syria, modern day Syria and Damascus, and goes all the way up to Haran. So long journey from the southern part of modern day Israel here, the Negev, all the way up to Haran. Notice, so here is a second blessing. The first blessing that he stole from Isaac was that of the earth, the dew of the earth, the blessing that was intended for Esau. And in a sense that God's people, the covenant people, he cares about all people, but the covenant people, Israel, he never, and throughout history, they have never been great and mighty nation like nations around them. Yes, they grew to their zenith under David and Solomon, the United Kingdom, and divided soon thereafter. But even throughout history, of course, then became no state at all, and were harassed and attempted Holocaust during World War II. The Jewish people have never been like some of the other peoples as far as wealthy, never been a world power, but God has been with them. And that's one reason I think it helps us to see that the blessing that he stole from Esau, conniving Isaac for it, was not ever intended for him. And in 32, when he reunites with Esau, there really is a sense in which in all that he's offering back to him, it's probably some kind of a recognition that this really belongs to you. Because what God intended, the blessing that he intended that Isaac gives him here, and he didn't have to connive and deceive for this blessing. 28:3, may God Almighty bless you, make you fruitful, increase your numbers until you become a community of peoples. So to become his covenant people, to become a community of people of tribes, that's what God intended, but never to become a powerhouse the way that other nations were around them. And then Esau, verse 6, hears that Isaac had blessed Jacob, sent him off. He realizes in verse 8 how displeasing the Canaanite women were to his father, the two Hittite women that he had taken. And so he takes from the house of Ishmael. And I misread that for years. that when he saw that that had displeased them, he took these other wives, and without really looking closely at it, I thought, well, he's just trying to drive the knife in a little deeper, but not at all. Esau here is acknowledging that the Hittite women that he took, how displeased Isaac and Rebekah were. So he doesn't go to the Canaanites. It's real clear in the text. I don't know why. I think it was just not reading the text carefully. He doesn't go to the Canaanites to take other wives. He goes to their family, to Isaac's half-brother Ishmael, and takes a wife from there, in addition to the wives that he already had. So this was as an appeasement to, he saw that Jacob honored them by not taking Canaanite wives. So maybe one of his moments of having a bit more conscience, he goes and takes a wife from the descendants of Ishmael. Then Jacob's, as he carries on, he's at Bethel, and I'm going to let Kirk Castleman say a little bit, but the Hebrew breaks down to Beit, house, El, God. So house of God. Anytime like Elohim, of course, God in the plural there, but Bethlehem. So Beit, house, Lechem, bread. Bethlehem was the house of bread. So interesting that the bread of life was born at the house of bread or in Bakeryville. So there's so many things like that where the place names are important. And then he has this vision of this ladder between heaven and earth. And so I mentioned Kirk, just a bit of email dialogue with him. And I wanted to just ask you, Kirk, to go ahead and share briefly about the resource that you have available and just kind of give it to them in a nutshell. So please go ahead.
Well, I didn't want to teach the class. I love coming to class. It's so precious to me. For years, I struggled with this. And so I've written a part of a lesson in my material on God's redemptive message. And I've called it Components of Jacob's Ladder. And the first thing, of course, is a little joke in that we try to get the students to understand that that the first thing about Jacob's Ladder was that it wasn't a ladder that you buy from the hardware store. More than likely, it was a stairway, as the NIV says. And then I do a thing to describe each element or component. So it's called Components of Jacob's Ladder. And what we do there is we look first at the angels, and then we study what the Bible says about angels. And then we study about the Son of Man, and that begins with John 1:51, as Kirk will say, and it actually interprets the whole vision. And then we talk about who's at the top. That's the Lord. Yahweh is at the top. And then he says, this is the house of God. This is a frightening, awesome place. And obviously that's the church, 1 Timothy 3:15. And the up and down nature of the angels has to do with the ascension and descending of Jesus in the virgin birth and the resurrection, incarnation of Jesus as the King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And so a lot of people have said how much they appreciated the study. They'd never seen Jacob's Ladder. It's unfortunate that many times it is taught as we are climbing Jacob's Ladder. There used to be an old vacation Bible school song like that. And so most people have told me they appreciated the exegesis. Really makes a lot of sense. I think if we'll do it messianically, look at the vision from the standpoint of fulfilled prophecy. And particularly, I've been fascinated by the fact that it is the Son of Man title for Jesus in John chapter 1 that really does make this vision what it is and beautiful.
Yeah.
I can obviously send you my lesson if you'd like to have it. It's K.H. Castleman, Castleman.
Hey, Kirk, can I interrupt you? Why don't you do
Yes.
this? Just send it to me, and then I will send it out to the class.
Oh,
that
okay.
way.
All right. I didn't know if
Yeah.
anybody was interested.
Well, I won't give them a choice. I'll just send it, and then you can not look at it if you don't want to. So that way they'll all get it. So if you want to just send it to me, I'll send it on out to folks, and that way they
I've been
won't
so
have to.
blessed by the response of so many people. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so that's so good to, what Kirk notes there about this, that it's, remember, always think of Colossians 2:17, that everything that has come before is but a shadow. The reality is found in Christ. And so all of, what we see in the Old Testament is foreshadowing what will be fulfilled in Christ. And so even this part of it here, the stairwell, Jacob's ladder, or the stairwell. And so, as Kirk mentioned, John 1:51, and just keep your place in Genesis, but just turn over there real quickly, just so you'll see it in the text, and hopefully, make a note in the margin back to, Genesis 28. John 1:51. So Jesus speaking to Nathanael, Nathanael saying, "How do you know me? I saw you while you were still under the fig tree." Nathanael declares, 49, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you're the King of Israel." So that messianic statement. In 50, Jesus said, "You believe because I told you I saw you under the fig tree. You will see greater things than that." He then added, "I tell you the truth, you shall see heaven open and the angels of God ascending and descending on the Son of Man." And so you can make a note there, John 1:51, back to Genesis 28:12, to that, to that occurrence of it. But we find out that Jesus it's foreshadowed there with Jacob, and he does call it Bethel, the house of God. But it's fulfilled in Jesus. And we see that Jesus is the true connection between heaven and earth. He is the connection between heaven and earth. And one thing about the comment of angels in both places, in John 1 and back in Genesis 28, another good teacher pointed out and just said, for one thing, there is more traffic between the spiritual realm and our earthly realm than we realize. And it is true. We don't have to worry about and be obsessed with angels, get all caught up in angelology. But it's like the Hebrew writer says in Hebrews 1, 14, are not angels, ministering spirits, sent to serve those who will inherit salvation. So we have a good description of their work. Again, we don't fixate on them. Hebrews 12, we keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, because the sermon is all about Jesus is greater. He's greater than the angels. He's greater than Moses. He's greater than Aaron. He's greater than the priesthood. But so it is fulfilled in Jesus. And you notice in the end of 28, Jacob made a vow saying, and it's not all bad. We're not running Jacob down, but he's got some growing and learning to do. This is early on in his life. And so there's this if then, 20, if God will be with me, watch over me, give me food, clothes. If God will do these things for me, the middle of verse 21, then the Lord will be my God. And the stone that I've set up a pillar will be his house. And of all that you give me, I'll give a tenth. So there's maturity in that too, because he speaks of tithing, of giving a tenth to God. There's also this condition: if God will do these things for me, then he will be my God. And of course, we're grateful for what we get from the Lord. We just don't want to treat him as fire insurance, some form of obedience or action in, and then like a vending machine that we're looking to get something out of. We love because he's first loved us. And we don't put this stipulation, well, if you will do this for me. Now, of course, a lot of people have had a crisis moment statement to God, if you will bring me through this. And a lot have followed through on that and served him. So God's bigger than that. He's not petty. So if we do that to him, he's big enough and mature enough to honor us. But we don't want our devotion to him to hinge on if you do this. For example, because I think it gets misused, the prayer of Jabez, expand my holdings, my sphere. Well, we don't treat the Lord like that. And Jesus doesn't pray prayer like that. He prays, do this, Father, but not my will, yours be done. So I know it's been popular over the last decade, but we need to be careful even when we look at that, because often taken out of context in the way that it's used. Any other thoughts, reflections on 28? If not, we want to go on into 29. When we get to 30, we'll have to skip part of it. So let's go on and carry on into 29.
Chapter 29. Then Jacob continued on his journey and came to the land of the eastern peoples. There he saw a well in the open country, with 3 flocks of sheep lying near it, because the flocks were watered from that well. The stone over the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, the shepherds would roll the stone away from the well's mouth and water the sheep. Then they would return the stone to its place over the mouth of the well. Jacob asked the shepherds,
My brothers, where are you from?
"We are from Haran," they replied. He said to them,
Do you know Laban, Nahor's grandson?
"Yes, we know him," they answered. Then Jacob asked them,
Is he well?
"Yes, he is," they said. "And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep."
Look,
He said,
the sun is still high. It is not time for the flocks to be gathered. Water the sheep and take them back to pasture.
"We can't," they replied, "until all the flocks are gathered and the stone has been rolled away from the mouth of the well. Then we will water the sheep." While he was still talking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherd. When Jacob saw Rachel, daughter of his uncle Laban, and Laban's sheep, he went over and rolled the stone away from the mouth of the well and watered his uncle's sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and began to weep aloud. He had told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and a son of Rebekah, so she ran and told her father. As soon as Laban heard the news about Jacob, his sister's son, he hurried to meet him. He embraced him, kissed him, and brought him to his home. And there Jacob told him all these things. Then Laban said to him,
You are my own flesh and blood.
after Jacob had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him,
Just because you are a relative of mine, should you work for me for nothing? Tell me what your wages should be.
Now Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Jacob was in love with Rachel and said,
I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter, Rachel.
Laban said,
It's better that I give her to you than to some other man. Stay here with me.
So Jacob served 7 years to get Rachel, but they seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Then Jacob said to Laban,
Give me my wife. My time is completed, and I want to make love to her.
So Laban brought together all the people of the place and gave a feast. But when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and brought her to Jacob, and Jacob made love to her. And Laban gave his servant Zilpah to his daughter as her attendant. When morning came, there was Leah. So Jacob said to Laban,
What is this you have done to me? I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?
Laban replied,
It is not our custom here to give the younger daughter in marriage before the older one. Finish this daughter's bridal week. Then we will give you the younger one also, in return for another 7 years of work.
and Jacob did so. He finished the week with Leah, and then Laban gave him his daughter Rachel, his wife. Laban gave his servant Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her attendant. Jacob made love to Rachel also, and his love for Rachel was greater than his love for Leah. And he worked for Laban another 7 years. When the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, he enabled her to conceive, but Rachel remained childless. Leah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Reuben, for she said,
It is because the Lord has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now.
She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said,
Because the Lord heard that I am not loved, he gave me this one too.
so she named him Simeon. Again she conceived, and when she gave birth to a son, she said,
Now at last my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons.
so he was named Levi. She conceived again, and when she gave birth to a son, she said,
This time I will praise the Lord.
so she named him Judah. Then she stopped having children.
All right, pause there just a minute. I got you. Risha made it part of it. Yeah, welcome, Risha. He travels Oh, not north. I should have added back when we were on that part in chapter 28 of Jacob in your notes, the points in your notes, but it is a good point. Like Jacob, we need to have our own encounter with God and develop our own faith in God, and not that of our parents or someone else that mentored us. Those are important people and they can help bring us, usher us to the Lord. But, the saying, God has no grandchildren. He has sons and daughters. We don't get in on our parents' coattails or our mentors' coattails. We encounter God and we need our own faith in God. And so for Jacob, yes, he knew of, the God of Abraham, Isaac. He encounters him to some degree here. He'll encounter him 20 years later in a much more humbled way when he wrestles with God. And it's interesting, there's both of his names, and we won't get to until 32 where he wrestles with God and his name is changed, but both names indicate wrestle, a wrestling. Jacob is like wrestling with his brother Esau. He's a cheat, a conniver. Israel wrestles with God. And Jacob's life seems to be one of conflict and wrestling with others. But he comes back up to where Abraham had sent Eliezer to find a wife for Isaac, where you got Rebekah to Laban. So what did we say last week? He would be his father's brother's son, so like his cousin. And of course, Jacob then is a nephew to Laban, with Isaac marrying his sister Rebekah. Do we have those all? Well, we just get to all of the children here. The L's are Leah, Reuben, from Leah, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, Judah, stops. Then we have Rachel's handmaid Bilhah as Dan and Naphtali. Then Leah's handmaid Zilpah, Gad, and Asher. And then 3 more by Leah, Issachar, Zebulun, Dinah, not son but daughter there. And then finally Rachel having Joseph and Benjamin. A lot before that though, and we don't want to miss the story that goes on in the process. So the meeting at the well, again, not unlike Eliezer when he sees Rebekah at the well. Rachel's there. She's a shepherdess, which is still true, which is still practiced in Middle Eastern cultures today. It's not just, and it tends to be younger ones, boys and girls that are the shepherds for the flocks. 20 there and 14, 15 acknowledges the family, says, don't work for me for nothing. Laban, of course, is going to bilk Jacob for all he can get. He says, 18, he'd been a month there already. Verse 18, Jacob was in love with Rachel. So there you already hear about the love story. I'll work 7 years in return for your younger daughter. That is all good. We think, oh, it's going to be a nice love story. Of course, it's more heart-wrenching and more tragic than that. You go on to 21. So he finished his 7 years. 21, give me my wife. They come together at night. You wonder how in the world could it happen? But Laban gives Leah first, and through the night, and even sleeping with her. And just to try to imagine a little bit of Leah's heartbreak. She's the unloved one. Rachel was beautiful in form, and whatever weak in eyes meant, it was obviously meant to convey that she wasn't as attractive as Leah. She had weak eyes. Doesn't mean that, maybe she was nearsighted or something necessarily, because it's contrasted with Rachel's nice form, nice figure, and beautiful appearance. And Leah was not that way. So here she always had, this comparison with Rachel. And it didn't have to turn out to be pitting sister against sister, where Rachel talks about winning over Leah. And that's the sad part of it. Jacob loved deeply, but he did it in a very flawed way and showing a lot of partiality. If you ever grew up in your family, if I ask, I don't know, depends on how many children there are, but was any partiality shown in your family between, parents to kids, or maybe grandparents to kids? And nearly everybody has encountered some form of partiality, and it doesn't produce anything good. And especially when it's this blatant and rejecting the other, then it'd be hard to imagine Leah's feelings through the night. She knows she's given underhandedly to Jacob, but on the wedding night, sleeps with her in the morning. He wakes up and sees that it's Leah, maybe overhears the argument between Jacob and Laban. Why have you done this to me, given me Leah instead of Rachel? So it doesn't take much thinking to see how clear it was to Leah that she was unloved. And so Laban is as much of a conniver as Jacob. So he finishes the week, and not another 7 years, finishes the bridal week, and then he gets Rachel, and then he works another 7 years for her. I think at this point, I'm going to just share a little bit of the story. I'd gone through a book years ago, Love Kindness by Barry Corey, and he has a chapter where he talks about Leah and gives a little bit more insight. And I've got it queued up. We'll do just a few minutes here, and then we'll go back.
As I rambled month by month through the chapters of Genesis, something in me was kindled by Leah's story. Hers is fundamentally a story about a kindness that sees others as God sees them, not how our culturally programmed eyes see them. The day I told the story of this outcast woman to this highbrow room filled with Boston businessmen, it seemed an odd juxtaposition. The room of men, many of them husbands and fathers, was about to listen to a story that shed a warped light on some husbands and fathers in the Bible. It was quiet that day as I spoke about a girl who was shunned by both these important men in her life. This precious daughter never fully understood the love of her father until she saw the love of her father. On first read, Genesis 29 sounds like a love story. But when I read it carefully and shared it with these investment bankers and educators and high-tech administrators, I saw it as a story about the mission of God emerging out of a messy family situation. The chapter opens with Jacob, Abraham's grandson, fleeing from his family after big problems with his dad, Isaac, his mother, Rebekah, and his twin brother, Esau. After being on the lam for many days, Jacob arrives at his grandfather's old hometown, a town he has never visited. The first place Jacob comes to is a well in a field where the townsfolk gather with their sheep. As Jacob waits for someone to roll the stone off the mouth of the well, she shows up, a shepherdess. She is gorgeous, this stunning young woman named Rachel. Jacob is transfixed. Perhaps trying to impress her, he rolls that large stone off the well's opening. I reminded the breakfast eaters of the backdrop of the story. This was Jacob, who hung out in the pantry, not the gym like his brother Esau. Esau the hunter was more Russell Crowe. Jacob the chef was more like Wolfgang Puck. The men of the Union Club, many unfamiliar with this story, listened intently to the romantic intrigue that started the chapter. So far, so good. Jacob is the unmarried son of a wealthy family. Rachel is the beautiful girl who catches his glance. I'm sure some of the Boston businessmen began to fast forward in their imaginations to what would be the amorous outcome of the couple's encounter by the well. His manly, stone-moving exploit works that day, and Jacob and Rachel begin to talk. Soon, Jacob discovers that Rachel is his kin. She runs to tell her dad, whose name is Laban, Jacob's uncle, and it becomes this big, happy family reunion. And Jacob and Rachel marry and live happily ever after. Well, not really. Laban also has an older daughter, Leah. The way Genesis describes Leah in comparison to Rachel is a bit awkward. Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Chapter 29, verse 17. It's not clear what weak eyes means. I don't think the problem was with Leah's vision, like she needed LASIK surgery. The Bible doesn't compare how accurately Leah read the eye chart how Rachel did. The story says Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel had a lovely figure and was beautiful. Read, Rachel was dazzling, her older sister wasn't. In other words, Whatever was wrong with Leah's eyes, it had something to do with her looks. The comparison is between Leah's weak eyes and Rachel's lovely form, her body. Something about Leah, especially in comparison to her younger sister, was unattractive. I told the curious men at the Union Club, many of them fathers, that for her entire life, Leah had to live with her stunningly beautiful sister Rachel. Rachel was the sister who transfixed men and caused them to roll large stones away for her. Men looked right past Leah and saw Rachel. Jacob was one of those men. I could have been too. Enthralled by Rachel, Jacob says to Laban, "I'll work for you 7 years in return for your younger daughter Rachel." Genesis chapter 29, verse 18. So Jacob serves Laban 7 years to get Rachel. And in a way that is borderline sappy, the story says the 7 years seemed like only a few days to him because of his love for her. Verse 20. Finally, the long-awaited wedding day arrives. The pageantry begins, and Laban brings together all the people and holds this incredible feast. When the revelry ends, the honeymoon starts. Jacob enters the wedding chamber for the night he's been awaiting for 7 years. At this point in the story, no one in the Union Club dining room was checking his smartphone or getting up for another cup of New England Coffee Company Joe. It's the wedding night, and married men in the room flash back to what was, while the unmarried flash forward to what might be. Some listening had no idea stories of honeymoon chambers were included in the Holy Scriptures. I continued, revealing the unforeseen plot twist. Laban, the new father-in-law, has a ruse in mind for Jacob, his new son-in-law. He'll sneak the weak-eyed Leah into the bridal chamber for the honeymoon night instead of the eye-catching Rachel, hoping a tanked-up Jacob might not discover until morning. Then Leah, by consummation, will be Jacob's wife, not Rachel. The story says, but when evening came, he took his daughter Leah and gave her to Jacob, and Jacob lay with her. When morning came, there was Leah. Genesis chapter 29, verses 23 and 25. When morning came, there was Leah. 6 angering words for Jacob. 6 painful words for Leah. Perhaps Jacob rolled over at daybreak, saw Leah, and yelled, "You?" Jacob flees the honeymoon chamber and tracks down Laban, and an argument breaks out between them, 2 of the closest men in Leah's life. "What is this you have done to me?" Jacob demands. "I served you for Rachel, didn't I? Why have you deceived me?" Genesis chapter 29, verse 25. Though we were a dining room full of men, I asked them to think about this story from Leah's perspective, what her keen ears heard and her weak eyes saw. Imagine the despair of the wedding night as maybe Jacob kept saying the name Rachel in the dark, thinking he was with Leah's more beautiful and younger sister. How might she have felt when Jacob awoke to discover the woman he was with was Leah, the weaker-eyed older sister? When morning came, there was Leah. Laban, her father, didn't want her. Jacob, her new husband, didn't want her. Perhaps Leah eavesdropped on the shouting match between these 2 men over this ugly trick, her self-esteem eroding as their tempers flared. To make matters worse, Laban gives Rachel in marriage to Jacob a week later. Already living in her ravishing sister's shadow, she's rejected by her dad who wants to give her away. He is in essence saying, "You'll never be noticed by a man." Leah had weak eyes, but Rachel was beautiful.
I'm gonna stop there. It's enough that it goes on, and it's some good reflection for another few minutes, but enough to just help us to see this part of the story. And it can get so truncated here in the text that we just don't think about it much. Now, Linda, I appreciate your input, and you've touched on something that that we definitely would see and would come up here in even just a little bit. Linda writes, Leah may not have been loved by Jacob, but he certainly didn't ignore her. God blessed her, and Jacob buried her in the family plot, whereas Rachel was buried somewhere else. It seems God regarded Leah as the favored wife. And it's a good reflection. And it's true. He didn't love her like he loved Rachel. And there was pain in that, and it brought pain in their family. But that's what we would see next in verse 31 about God seeing Leah. And so certainly a big point to be brought out. And then when we get later on to Leah's burial and Jacob's, he is buried with Leah, who was buried near Abraham, and Sarah. They were elsewhere whenever Rachel died, and so she was buried elsewhere. And so those are important points to remember, and especially even though Jacob fell to which, okay. Yes. Norma's asking, do you think Jacob grew to love her after she gave him all of those sons? And up to the fourth son, we just don't see anything real clearly in the text. He, of course, continues to sleep with her, have sons by her, but even at the third son, we'll get to that in order. But so good question. It's good to think of that, and probably certainly there was some shift that here, yes, 6 sons through her, half of the whole number of tribes. There had to be some attitude shift, but look as it goes along. Verse 31, when the Lord saw that Leah was not loved, so clearly at the onset, Jacob did not love her like he loved the beautiful Rachel. But let's don't overlook the fact that God saw her. Just you remember Hagar's words, "You are the God who sees me." Here is that same language being used. God saw Leah. So even while humans, we will show partiality, and I hope we don't, but we can overlook people or size people up just by outward appearance. God doesn't do that. And so he sees Leah and he's compassionate to her, and she has children. There at the end of 32, he has seen my misery. Surely my husband will love me now. And most will say Leah's is more of a story of unrequited love, that she doesn't ever seem to get what she is hoping for, love and acceptance by Jacob. She has another son, and says
Kirk,
there in 31,
Kirk,
yes, yes.
And not only that, but Leah's son was Judah, and Judah and Leah are in the lineage of Jesus, and Rachel is not.
Right.
Which is always, that is just always fascinating me.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you can't help but see that when you get to her fourth son, to Judah. And so, and just like there's other, quote, unfavorable women that Matthew gives in his lineage, four different women in his genealogy, prostitute and a Canaanite, probably, with Ruth, maybe a Hittite, even so the unloved wife, Leah, with Judah coming from her. And so it just ought to be so clear to us that God just does not look like we do. And we need to have the eyes of our Father, songs to that effect, to look through the eyes of our Father at people. She says there in 33, because the Lord heard that I am not loved, so he gave me this one. She named him Simeon. So up through the second son, of course, still not loved. The third one, she says, now at last my husband will become attached to me. Names him Levi. That's her hope. And then the fourth son, Judah. This time I will praise the Lord. And so there is a shift with Leah herself after hoping, maybe living for Jacob's love and acceptance. Here on Judah, she says, I will praise the Lord and the God who has seen me. And so that's noteworthy, that Leah's her own, what you would say, maybe maturing. And even though it was a painful process, her giving thanks to God for the children that he had given her. Let's go on in chapter 30. I'm just going to do the first 22 or 23 verses of chapter 30.
Chapter 30. When Rachel saw that she was not bearing Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister. So she said to Jacob,
Give me children, or I'll die.
Jacob became angry with her and said,
Am I in the place of God who has kept you from having children?
Then she said,
Here is Bilhah, my servant. Sleep with her so that she can bear children for me, and I too can build a family through her.
So she gave him her servant Bilhah as a wife. Jacob slept with her, and she became pregnant and bore him a son. Then Rachel said,
God has vindicated me. He has listened to my plea and given me a son.
Because of this, she named him Dan. Rachel's servant Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. Then Rachel said,
I have had a great struggle with my sister, and I have won.
so she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, she took her servant Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said,
What good fortune.
so she named him Gad. Leah's servant Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said,
How happy I am. The women will call me happy.
so she named him Asher. During wheat harvest, Reuben went out into the fields and found some mandrake plants, which he brought to his mother Leah. Rachel said to Leah,
Please give me some of your son's mandrakes.
but she said to her,
Wasn't it enough that you took away my husband? Will you take my son's mandrakes too? Very well.
Rachel said.
He can sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes.
So when Jacob came in from the fields that evening, Leah went out to meet him.
You must sleep with me.
She said,
I have hired you with my son's mandrakes.
so he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she became pregnant and bore Jacob a fifth son. Then Leah said,
God has rewarded me for giving my servant to my husband.
so she named him Issachar. Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. Then Leah said,
God has presented me with a precious gift. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I have borne him 6 sons.
so she named him Zebulun. Sometime later, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive. She became pregnant and gave birth to a son and said,
God has taken away my disgrace.
she named him Joseph and said,
May the Lord add to me another son.
Well, so the saga continues there. Rachel's demand to Jacob there in verse 1, give me children or I'll die. His response, maybe things aren't so good right now, even with Rachel. Am I in the place of God? So she gives Bilhah as a wife, and notice not just as a concubine, but both of these given, their maidservants are given as a wife to Jacob there in verse 4. Just noting Rachel's response still seems to be centered on contention and struggle. God's vindicated me. And the second one on Naphtali in verse 8, Rachel said, I have had a great struggle with my sister and I have won. However you slice it, there's some immaturity in that. There's some, beauty, but that beauty at this point maybe was just more skin deep and not really deep in her heart, because to her, this was all about winning over. She had been used to winning over Leah. Now Leah had 4 sons and she had none. And that was a bitter pill to swallow for her. So it's sad to see between the sisters there, be this kind of contention and conflict. But partiality never produces anything good. And that's why we'll see all the way over into James. Whenever James is rebuking those Christians, you show partiality to the rich when they come into your service, and it's the rich who oppress you. And you tell the poor, why don't you sit in the back there? And then you give the rich a place of honor. And no matter where it's practiced, in a family or in a church, partiality never produces. Showing partiality never produces good, and clearly told God shows no partiality. So you go on, the maidservant, Leah's servant, and her response isn't so much about contention with Rachel, like there at verse 13, with Asher, how happy I am, then previously with Gad, what good fortune. Then the whole issue of the mandrakes, which we don't know exactly. Some aphrodisiac, so here, some mandrakes, a plant, obviously, in the, to them had this ability to, impart eroticism or act as an aphrodisiac, cause them to love. That's nothing terribly unusual. Even when we were in Kenya, There were charms that men could buy and keep in their pockets, and presumably if the high price that they pay for these charms, they could squeeze this charm, while it's in their pocket and cause a good looking woman to take note of them. So there's been these kinds of things all through the millennia. But there may be more. Kirk, someone else may know more about that particular part. But
Same as Cameroon.
yeah, okay, yes, that's still practiced. Still resulting in conflict between the sisters. Basically hires him with the mandrakes. Leah saying, "You must sleep with me." So she has two more sons then. Issachar and Zebulun, and then a daughter Dinah. That factors into the story later. And even up to Zebulun, her last born son, she's still hoping for attention or honor. This time my husband will treat me with honor because I've borne him 6 sons. So it seems, at least up to that point, still not even being maybe treated with the honor that she had hoped for. But even with Rachel and her disposition, 22, God remembers Rachel, listened to her, opened her womb, and she has Joseph. We're coming down to just a few minutes. I want to just say, we're not going to listen through the flocks. In short, there in 25:30, verse 25, he tells Laban, "Send me on my way," after his 14 years of service. Laban responds there in 27, "I have learned by divination that the Lord has blessed me because of you." Well, you would think that would be obvious, but in divination is not something that, God approves of. And of course, so they weren't. He had other household gods that ends up being stolen, that Rachel steals from his house. So he had other allegiance besides God himself. But he talks him into staying, and Jacob says, "Okay, then get me in short, you can read all of that and detailed about the peeled rods and all." Jacob knew something, of course, about genetics, and of course, then God blessed him too, but in selective breeding, start with the weaker ones, but he manages it where he ends up with, through selective breeding, the stronger flock, and Laban ends up with the weaker. And so in 31 is where I want us to go ahead. In the 5 or 6 minutes that we have remaining, let's go through 31.
After Rachel gave birth to Joseph, Jacob said to Laban,
Sit.
Sorry, I need to go on now to the next one.
Chapter 31. Jacob heard that Laban's sons were saying,
Jacob has taken everything our father owned and has gained all this wealth from what belonged to our father.
and Jacob noticed that Laban's attitude toward him was not what it had been. Then the Lord said to Jacob,
Go back to the land of your fathers and to your relatives, and I will be with you.
So Jacob sent word to Rachel and Leah to come out to the fields where his flocks were. He said to them,
I see that your father's attitude toward me is not what it was before, but the God of my father has been with me. You know that I've worked for your father with all my strength, yet your father has cheated me by changing my wages 10 times. However, God has not allowed him to harm me. If he said, the speckled ones will be your wages, then all the flocks gave birth to speckled young. And if he said, the streaked ones will be your wages, then all the flocks bore streaked young. So God has taken away your father's livestock and has given them to me. In breeding season, I once had a dream in which I looked up and saw that the male goats mating with the flock were streaked, speckled, or spotted. The angel of God said to me in the dream, Jacob. I answered, here I am. And he said, look up and see that all the male goats mating with the flock are streaked, speckled, or spotted. For I have seen all that Laban has been doing to you. I am the God of Bethel, where you anointed a pillar and where you made a vow to me. Now leave this land at once and go back to your native land.
Then Rachel and Leah replied,
Do we still have any share in the inheritance of our father's estate? Does he not regard us as foreigners? Not only has he sold us, but he has used up what was paid for us. Surely all the wealth that God took away from our father belongs to us and our children. So do whatever God has told you.
Then Jacob put his children and his wives on camels, and he drove all his livestock ahead of him, along with all the goods he had accumulated in Paddan-aram, to go to his father Isaac in the land of Canaan. When Laban had gone to shear his sheep, Rachel stole her father's household gods. Moreover, Jacob deceived Laban the Aramean by not telling him he was running away. So he fled with all he had, crossed the Euphrates River, and headed for the hill country of Gilead. On the third day, Laban was told that Jacob had fled. Taking his relatives with him, he pursued Jacob for 7 days and caught up with him in the hill country of Gilead. Then God came to Laban the Aramean in a dream at night and said to him,
Be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad.
Jacob had pitched his tent in the hill country of Gilead when Laban overtook him, and Laban and his relatives camped there too. Then Laban said to Jacob,
What have you done? You've deceived me, and you carried off my daughters like captives in war. Why did you run off secretly this evening? Why didn't you tell me, so I could send you away with joy and singing to the music of timbrels and harps? You didn't even let me kiss my grandchildren and my daughters goodbye. You have done a foolish thing. I have the power to harm you. But last night, the God of your father said to me, be careful not to say anything to Jacob, either good or bad. Now you have gone off because you long to return to your father's household. But why did you steal my gods?
Jacob answered Laban,
I was afraid because I thought you would take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find anyone who has your gods, that person shall not live in the presence of our relatives. See for yourself whether there is anything of yours here with me. And if so, take it.
Now Jacob did not know that Rachel had stolen the gods. So Laban went into Jacob's tent, and into Leah's tent, and into the tent of the 2 female servants, but he found nothing. After he came out of Leah's tent, he entered Rachel's tent. Now Rachel had taken the household gods and put them inside her camel saddle, and was sitting on them. Laban searched through everything in the tent, but found nothing. Rachel said to her father,
Don't be angry, my lord, that I cannot stand up in your presence. I'm having my period.
So he searched, but could not find the household gods. Jacob was angry, and took Laban to task.
What is my crime?
He asked Laban,
How have I wronged you that you hunt me down? Now that you have searched through all my goods, what have you found that belongs to your household? Put it here, in front of your relatives and mine, and let them judge between the two of us. I have been with you for 20 years now. Your sheep and goats have not miscarried, nor have I eaten rams from your flocks. I did not bring you animals torn by wild beasts. I bore the loss myself. And you demanded payment from me for whatever was stolen by day or night. This was my situation. The heat consumed me in the daytime, and the cold at night, and sleep fled from my eyes. It was like this for the 20 years I was in your household. I worked for you 14 years for your 2 daughters, and 6 years for your flocks, and you changed my wages 10 times. If the God of my father, the God of Abraham, and the fear of Isaac had not been with me, you would surely have sent me away empty-handed. But God has seen my hardship and the toil of my hands, and last night he rebuked you.
Laban answered Jacob,
The women are my daughters, the children are my children, and the flocks are my flocks. All you see is mine. Yet what can I do today about these daughters of mine, or about the children they have borne? Come now, let's make a covenant, you and I, and let it serve as a witness between us.
I want to stop there as we're getting close to being out of time. Well, I have up till 5 till before Jim has to take it, but he just goes on and then make this agreement. They take this heap of stones, and which is not uncommon. We'll see that later, taking stones and piling them up, saying that this is a witness. This reminds us that we have made this agreement together not to harm one another. And then it finishes in 55. Early the next morning, Laban kissed his grandchildren and his daughters and blessed them. Then he left and returned home. Just in the story, Jacob hasn't at this point gotten past still deceiving. He deceives Laban again, by after what Laban had done to him, he deceives him by leaving in secret, taking the daughters or the flocks, the children with him, recounts how Laban had cheated him. It's interesting to see the use of language there. Jacob talking about the God of my fathers, Laban talking about the God of your fathers. So still Laban, even though he knew of Elohim Yahweh, he didn't serve him the way that Abraham, Isaac did. And so God's protection, one of the takeaways for us, I think, is even with all of Jacob's shortcomings, there's the goodness and the graciousness of God, that he is still there not because of Jacob's goodness, and that's what we need to remember, but because of God's goodness, because of his promise to Abraham, I will give you a family, and through you all the peoples of the earth will be blessed. So even Laban and his family was blessed because of part of that promise. And so for us, if we get caught up in a works-oriented mindset, then we feel like everything that God can or can't do for us, it hinges on our performance. And God wasn't good to Jacob because he was such an outstanding young man. It was because of his promise and his covenant. And even so with us, because of what God has done for us through Jesus Christ, he is good to us. And we can rest in that. And when we stumble, when we sin, we have forgiveness through the blood of Christ. And it's because of God's goodness, not our own goodness, that God accepts us, sees us, loves us, and cares for us. Well, we need to stop there and carry on with the story next week. So until then, the Lord bless you, be with you. All right. Goodbye, everyone.
I love you, Kirk.
Good night.
Thank you, buddy.
All right. Thank y'all.
Man, what a
Thank you.
lift.
Good night.
Good night, Kirk. Thanks.